Kaleo, can I get started? All right, thank you for joining us. I will introduce everyone shortly. However, I do not want to bury the lead. The three main takeaways from the poll are: number one, transit remains popular. Number two, voters do not believe the government can deliver on promises. And three, voters prefer progressive resources such as income taxes on the wealthy and increases in corporate taxes over taxes that hit everyone, like sales taxes. Welcome to our webinar, Winning a 2026 Bay Area Transit Funding Measure. My name is Darnell Grisby. I am a senior fellow at the Beneficial State Foundation, as well as a board member at Seamless Bay Area. Today, I'm joined by Matt Hogan of Impact Research and Adina Levin, Advocacy Director of Seamless Bay Area, to discuss the results and implications of a public opinion poll and focus groups conducted earlier this year of Bay Area likely voters and their attitudes towards potential public transportation ballot measures. Despite efforts to frame recent elections as evidence of a shift to the right in the region, there's evidence that we remain the center of progressivism, but with a healthy dose of pragmatism. Our focus group and poll show a commitment to progressive values such as equity, along with a concern for effectiveness and efficiency. It is areas like ours that must show the nation that democracy still works for the American people. Bay Area voters understand the assignment. The past several years have been particularly challenging for Bay Area public transit. The pandemic caused a devastating drop in ridership, which has in turn affected agency revenues and has led to cuts in service. With ridership only recovering gradually, many of the region's agencies are facing the prospect of major service cuts within the next couple of years, unless new long-term sources of funding are identified. It is important to put these recent financial challenges in the context of a transit system that suffered decades of underinvestment before the pandemic. Transit still does not reach many areas of our region with the frequency, speed, and reliability needed to accomplish our climate and equity goals as a region. While transit agencies have been working collectively to move towards a more seamless system, the need remains great. Among the most impacted by the region's transit fragmentation are low-income people who have been forced to drive to the outer parts of our region to search for affordable housing, where transit options are minimal, inconvenient, and time-consuming. Many of these people are forced into car ownership due to the lack of transit as an option. It is upon this backdrop that Beneficial State Foundation and Seamless Bay Area sought to gauge regional sentiment and to get a critical check on our collective temperature on transportation. With that, I'd like to turn it over to Matt Hogan of Impact Research to present the poll results and some of the key findings. After Matt, Adina Levin will discuss the current state of affairs and advancing a regional ballot measure for additional funding. Matt, take it away.
Great. Thank you so much, Darnell, and thank you all for having me. I'm just going to pull up my screen here, go through the results. I'll see that okay. There we go. All right. So I will note, just to get the methodology, first, this poll or built off rather a online focus group with likely voters in the Bay Area. This poll was conducted with 600 likely 2026 voters in the Bay Area, conducted in early January, and also conducted in both English and Spanish, and very consistent with what we saw in the online focus groups with these voters. I think one kind of key finding is that we heard in both the focus groups and see in the poll that voters are very much dissatisfied with the state of transportation in the Bay Area. That goes both for public transit and roads and highways, with strong majorities of voters rating both negatively, which really creates an opening for this ballot initiative. While this dissatisfaction with transportation creates an opportunity for supporters of this transit initiative, we do have headwinds in a sense of strong distrust that local government will spend money on public transit effectively. We heard this a lot in the focus groups, and we see it in the poll as well. A majority of 54% of voters say they don't trust local government officials in the Bay Area to spend money for public transit or on roads or highways. That includes a majority of those voters, that about a fifth of the electorate they we identify as our persuasion targets, those voters that we would need to win over in order to pass a ballot initiative. And as you can see, is especially among Republicans and independents. That said, we built off, the findings of our qualitative research to draft the wording of a potential ballot initiative, and took, effort to address that distrust in the government by talking about how would include spending oversight for experts and annual audits, in addition to the number of benefits in terms of transportation that it would provide. And encouragingly, we see strong support for this transit initiative. 57% of voters in the Bay Area say they would vote yes on this initiative if it was on the ballot, compared to just 38% who would vote no, and 5% undecided. In addition to the encouraging overall results, we also see that the yes side has advantage in intensity, and by that we mean the share saying that they would strongly support this initiative. 41% are strong supporters versus just 31% who strongly oppose the initiative. When we look at the voters who are most likely to support this transit initiative, Democrats are especially supportive. They make up, about 2/3 of the Bay Area electorate, and encouragingly, about 70% of Democrats say they would support the initiative. Support is also especially high among seniors at 64%, among regular transit users, and also in Alameda County. We do see, fairly strong opposition among Republicans, but no notable difference by gender. We tested a variety of different transportation outcomes to see which were most popular when it comes to this initiative. What we see from the poll is, the items presented on this slide here, all extremely popular with Bay Area voters. Repairing potholes, coordinated schedules for all Bay Area transit services, a new simplified pricing system for Bay Area transit, and additional security measures, as well as rapid bus and train routes that come every 10 minutes, all extremely popular, with over 70% of Bay Area voters saying they would be more likely to support the initiative if it included these components, with each of these components being especially popular among those persuadable voters on the initiative. In addition to the specific transit benefits that this initiative would provide, we also wanted to test a series of reforms, again, kind of targeting that palpable distrust that we heard both in the focus groups and see in this poll, with local government's ability to spend transit funding effectively. Here we also see a number of very popular reforms. These were the most popular of reforms of the 10 or so that we tested. Especially popular is requiring an annual independent audit of spending from the measure, but also, posting spending online to increase transparency, reducing administrative bureaucracy, and greater oversight by transit experts, as well as, requiring all transit agencies join a new entity to oversee all Bay Area transit agencies. Each of these reforms are supported by over 60% of Bay Area voters. So also very popular aspects of this initiative. In addition to the specific reforms and benefits that we tested, we also tested a series of about a dozen different messages in favor of the initiative. One message really stood out above the rest. And it was this message here that really combines both an emphasis on improving service and making it more convenient and less costly to taxpayers, while also addressing concerns about bureaucracy, which again is a critical concern that we need to address in our messaging. Highlighting that there are currently 27 public transit agencies, and talking about how this initiative would streamline transit by coordinating schedules, reducing bureaucracy, therefore making it more convenient and less costly to taxpayers. This was not only clearly the top message in favor of the initiative overall, it was also the top message among those persuadable voters on the initiative and across all ages and key demographics. So very much an important message that we want to drive. Other messages that we tested on behalf of the initiative that were popular, but not quite as popular as the message I just mentioned on that previous slide, talked about issues such as safety, improving service, issues of how it would improve issues of equity in the Bay Area, that it would be funded by the wealthy, and measures focused on accountability. And while all of these messages were popular and effective, what I think this really shows is that while they were not as effective as the message that combined both the accountability and metrics as well as the service, again, underscoring the importance of addressing both of those issues in our messaging. One of the messages that we tested that were not quite as effective, a message talking about how this initiative would help prevent cuts in public transit service, was the least effective of the messages that we tested. Other messages that were not quite as effective, focused on the impact on climate change, traffic, and the economy. This is consistent with what we heard in focus groups, where voters very much wanted to hear about, how specifically, this initiative would improve transit and transportation in the Bay Area, and how it would address their concerns about the money not being spent effectively, and their concerns over excessive bureaucracy. They heard all that messaging and heard the different aspects of the initiative. We wanted to kind of hear from these voters in a different way. After everything they'd heard, what stood out the best reason to support the initiative. And once again, the focus on improving service and reducing bureaucracy and improving coordination comes across here as well. On the left is open-end responses. So basically voters in their own words telling us the best reason to support the initiative. These are coded based on the responses that they gave. We also, gave them kind of very short kind of one-line explanations for the best reason to support it. And here again, the results very consistent with making public transit faster, more convenient, and more reliable, kind of seen as the biggest reason to support it, and then followed by how it would reduce bureaucracy and help ensure public transit funding is used most effectively, again, seen as the most important reasons to support this initiative. In addition to messaging, we also tested a number of different potential messengers about the initiative. And this is also consistent with what we heard in the focus groups. Voters most want to hear from public transit experts when it comes to transit. Nearly 2/3 said they would be very interested in hearing from what public transit experts had to say about this ballot measure. When we look among those persuadable voters on the initiative, that share rises to 75%. So those public transit efforts really the most important messengers as we look forward to a potential initiative campaign. I think a very important finding, I think anyone who's seen polling these days is well aware that inflation and costs are the dominant concern of voters these days, and that was definitely something we heard in the focus groups as well, and we see it here in the data too when we test a number of different revenue options for the initiative. there is strong support for a tax increase on employers for a year in revenue as a way to fund this initiative. There's also strong support for an income tax increase for individuals earning over $300,000 a year or households earning over $500,000 a year. Both are supported by strong majorities of voters and overwhelmingly supported by those who are persuadable on the initiative. However, those were the only two revenue options that we tested that generated majority support. When you look at further, tax increase overwhelmingly opposed. 78% of Bay Area voters opposed that as a way to fund this initiative. A new property tax also opposed by over 70% of voters. This is very consistent with what we heard from voters in focus groups. While they like the initiative, they feel already very squeezed by costs, and they do not want to support an initiative that will increase the burden on regular residents in the Bay Area. Finally, just to summarize kind of our suggested messaging, highlighting that there are currently 27 public transit agencies in the Bay Area, kind of highlights and underscores the need for reforms and helps bolster the case for this initiative. Then talking about the improvements this initiative would bring to public transit, such as making it more convenient and reliable by reducing bureaucracy, coordinating schedules, simplifying prices, and faster service. In addition to that, talking about how it requires an annual independent audit to ensure funding is spent properly. Also talking about how to improve road conditions by fixing potholes and uneven road surfaces. We're making it clear that is not only about improving public transit, but roads and highways as well. And finally, talking about how it will improve safety on transit by adding security officers and cameras to stations, trains, and buses. All of these were very popular aspects of the initiative that we should highlight in our messaging. And finally, just in terms of, just wanted to underscore some, key takeaways from the research. Again, this initiative is very popular. 57% of Bay Area voters support it. And not only do we have a real advantage in terms of overall support, but we also have intensity on our side with strong support for the initiative, 10 points above strong opposition. Really critical that our messaging address not only how this would improve transit in the Bay Area, but also assuage concerns about government waste and bureaucracy, given level concerns and skepticism that voters have that, therefore highlighting how this initiative would streamline service, improve coordination, and increase oversight. And finally, again, in terms of how to fund this initiative, taxing large multi-million-dollar employers and the wealthy, very popular and far more popular than any other funding source. Anything like a sales tax increase that would hit regular Bay Area residents generates strong opposition to this initiative. So those are just, I think, some of the in the polling. I'll now turn it back over to Darnell.
Thank you, Matt. Now we'll hear from Adina Levin, Advocacy Director of Seamless Bay Area, to discuss the implications of the poll.
Right. Thank you, Darnell. So these poll results have really important implications for the prospects of a regional transportation ballot measure. In terms of the timeline, this year in Sacramento, Senator Scott Wiener has introduced legislation, Senate Bill 925, that would authorize the Metropolitan Transportation Commission to put a measure on the ballot in 2026 or later. Seamless Bay Area has long been a strong supporter of additional funding for public transportation, in particular for more and better transit service. We're a founding member of Voices for Public Transportation, which is a coalition of over 50 community groups, transit groups, and labor groups advocating for a transformative regional transportation ballot measure. In this polling, consistent with other polling, we are encouraged to see that voters generally support and continue to support public transportation and want to see it get better. However, the poll also clearly indicates that a plan just to tread water, to prevent service cuts, to reduce decline is not good enough. People want a system that is more convenient than it is today. Fast, frequent, well-coordinated service with integrated fares and schedules and user-friendly signs. People want to feel safe and secure on buses and trains, stations and platforms. Whether someone is going to a job or a meeting or to see Dune in a theater or a medical center for a checkup, it should be easy to get there and to get back. And this is true not only for people who use transit frequently, but for infrequent riders and non-riders who all want to see the system get better. So this means that the measure is going to need to generate enough revenue, enough funding to not only prevent cuts, but to improve and coordinate service. There isn't a shortcut to that. Other research we've done in North America and around the world shows a strong correlation with service frequency and ridership. If we want a high ridership system, we need to fund the service. It also means that better service coordination is required, not optional as it is today. Voters want to see the public transportation system run effectively and efficiently and support oversight by qualified experts. And the research that we have done around the world shows that regions with well-coordinated high ridership systems have an empowered network manager authority overseeing common regional policies like integrated fares, service standards, and customer experience. This means that the authorizing legislation for a funding measure should include provisions that strengthen MTC's ability to be the network manager for the Bay Area's 27 agencies. And to do this effectively, we believe that MTC needs to have more transit experts overseeing funding and the policies relating to network management, as well as dedicated staff that can oversee regional policies and work closely in partnership with agencies to deliver that coordination. To win a measure, we need to be able to tell voters, this vote gets you a secure promise for better, more convenient, more seamlessly integrated service. And last but not least, the polling shows that revenue options that are targeted at higher income earners or corporations get more support, much more support, than a sales tax. The current authorizing legislation calls for a menu of funding options, and we want to see the menu include those progressive options. The high earner income tax option that we polled on generated $1.7 billion in our analysis. And when we talk about the need for enough funding to improve and transform service, that is one of the options that would be able to achieve that critical goal. So many of you might be wondering, what can you do to support a regional transportation funding measure that can deliver that transformation that voters want? The most important thing you can do is to communicate to your Bay Area legislators that you support a transformative regional transportation funding measure. In SB 125 in that legislation, and specifically to emphasize 3 key points: a measure focused on transit operations funding that can increase and coordinate and transform service, strengthen network management authority for MTC with an important role for transit experts, providing that oversight that voters demand, and last but not least, a menu of revenue options that includes progressive sources, including a regional income tax and a payroll tax. And we'll turn it back to Darnell for some concluding thoughts and question and answer.
Excellent. Thank you, Adina. Now we're going to go to Q&A. I'll lead a couple of questions through Q&A, and then we'll open it up to the audience. So to preface this, I'll say to our panel, let's keep the answers to about 2 minutes for each one of these questions. So as has been mentioned, our region has 27 transit agencies. Matt, what did the poll and the focus group reveal about the importance of this issue to the public?
Yeah, so I mean, we heard in the focus groups, especially, and we saw in the poll the kind of, the overall sense of the negative views of public transit. But the focus groups was really helpful, I think, to illustrating the why. And it was felt like it was just disconnected. Concerns about the quality of service and connectivity. And while they didn't, of course, know that there are 27 agencies, as soon as they heard that information, there was kind of a revelation of that explains, so much of these issues. So I think it very much, the sense that there are 27 agencies, I think feeds the sense of concerns over bureaucracy, and that the inefficiency and that the money isn't being spent effectively, which again, very important for us to address in our messaging in order to boost support for the initiative.
Thank you, Matt. So you've done polls around the country when it comes to transportation measures. Did the vociferous response from our folks here in the Bay Area surprise you regarding this question?
In terms of the support for the ballot initiative itself?
No, the question around 27 agencies.
Oh yeah, no. This is very, consistent. We see, throughout the country. I think, concern and frustration with government bureaucracy is, of course, not new, but I think it is, certainly heightened in recent years. I think especially stemming from the dysfunction that folks see and feel in Washington. No, this is very consistent with what we've heard in other places, but I would say perhaps even more palpable in terms of concern with the level of bureaucracy, especially once they hear with the number of agencies and that 27 number again.
Thank you, Matt. So the next question, either of you can answer this, but I'll focus this to Adina. What do you think these results in terms of the potential to pass a funding measure in 2026? What implications are there for that?
Yeah. So this polling does show broad support, including from people who don't use transit, but it also shows that people who use transit are stronger supporters. So everything in the next few years before a measure goes on the ballot that brings in more transit riders helps to build up that voter support. Next fall, we're going to be able to pay for transit using not only a special card or cash, but with a credit or debit card you already have. And so that means that every sports game or music festival where people can bring out friends and family is more people who can have a good experience and join the larger group of people who've used transit, enjoy it, consider using it more, and support making transit better.
Excellent, thank you. Just to the audience, prepare your questions. We're going to be turning to the audience for questions pretty soon. Next up, I'm going to ask Matt a question about these poll results as it relates to progressive tax revenue sources. What do you think the revenue source what role will the revenue source play in impacting support for the ballot measure, Matt?
The revenue source is really critical. Absolutely. I think it always is, but especially now, people are more cost sensitive than ever. So even something that they really hunger for, like more improved transit in the Bay Area, there is a real concern and pullback if it will result in higher taxes on themselves and people like them. We saw that in the focus groups and we saw that in the polling. It's not unique to the Bay Area either. It's something we consistently see whenever we test ballot initiatives. So the fact that this would only be funded by those who can afford it, the wealthy and wealthy corporations, really created we saw it in the focus groups, a great peace of mind, and made people much more comfortable with this initiative, because we would face significantly stiffer headwinds if this caused a higher cost burden than what are already people feeling very squeezed by these days due to inflation.
Right. And then my final question, then we'll move to questions from the audience. Between now and 2026, what else do we need to increase the likelihood of support for a measure? Will working on coordination in the near term help? Is there any remaining low-hanging fruit?
Yeah, let me take that, because there's some very good news in terms of what's going on behind the scenes and what people are likely to see coming forward. The region has been making progress in the last few years on a transformation action plan for integrated fares, more coordinated network planning, integrated signs, integrated branding, and these things are going to be starting to roll out. An all-agency transit pass pilot, the Clipper Bay Pass, is showing a 40% increase in transit ridership at public colleges and universities and affordable housing communities. And that pilot is now rolling out to employers and transportation management associations that manage transit benefits for multiple organizations. Another promising example, just one, the Van Ness Bus Rapid Transit Project reduced travel time by a third and more than doubled ridership compared to pre-pandemic levels. So transit priority is part of the transformation action plan, and we're seeing progress there. BART has already reduced delays due to safety incidents by a third by adding more police officers and other safety staff and running more frequent, shorter trains all day and all week, so that there's more people around when you're on a train and on a platform, and it is safer and more secure for people. So people's skepticism comes from what they see, and in changing the things that people see by making action and progress on that transformation action plan, those are things that can help lift up that voter confidence, as well as the legislation that will ensure that those improvements will continue and be a secure promise to the voters.
All right, thank you. So our first question from the audience, I'm going to rephrase a little bit. Where does the limitation on expanding roads come in? What is regional vehicle miles traveled? And how would that work? And would that be regressive towards low income and long distance commuters? So to reframe, we did have some poll questions about toll roads and the like. And we got some data on how people feel about the highway system and driving. Given that, to both of you, what would happen if we were to focus more on limiting the expansion of roads given the poll outcomes?
So I'll take a little bit of it, and others can address more. First of all, in the regional plan, including in the authorizing legislation proposal that MTC has brought forward, while taxing on roadways is seen as something that is eventually going to become necessary. Currently, a significant proportion of funding for roadways comes from a gas tax. And with the proliferation of electric vehicles over time, that gas tax is going to become less and less useful. And it is going to become essential to be able to have a different way of funding those roadways. That said, the topic of moving toward that kind of driving miles tax is complicated. There are political issues, there are implementation issues, and there is no expectation that that will move forward in time for a 2026 ballot measure. So the questions and concerns about how to do that are important, but they are not part of what's on the table for a regional transportation funding measure. Another thing that Seamless Bay Area has joined in support is a letter not wanting to see funding from a regional measure go toward expanding highways. Expanding highways is something that that creates environmental harm, that harms the communities that are impacted when homes and businesses are taken for the space expanding the highways. And it just takes us in a backwards direction from where we want to go towards increasing transit and active transportation. So that is not something that we want to see as a focus. We do believe that we see that polling for maintaining our roads and highways is extremely popular. Everyone wants pothole repairs. Everyone wants safety improvements. And these things help transit as well. And so that is something that we think is going to be essential to be a part of a funding measure going forward.
And Matt, I'd like for you to take this too, but I'll add a little additional proviso to what Adina just answered, which would be, given your experience, do you have any advice for a region that is experiencing additional suburbanization and increased car use? And oftentimes those things might lead to political outcomes we may not want because there's increased demand for driving, and that creates politics for more driving. Do you have any advice for regions that might be experiencing that?
I mean, my advice, and I think this is very consistent with what we heard in the focus groups and see in the poll, is to improve public transit. We heard that we in the qualitative research, particularly that voters, wanted to take public transit. It didn't seem, the current state of the system was just not up to the quality and convenience that allowed them to do so. On a consistent basis. So that would be my main recommendation, and just very much kind of bolstering what Adina said about the desire to improve the quality of roads. There's a real appetite for fixing potholes, improving surfaces, but much less so on expanding the number of roads or adding carpool or hot lanes. But yeah, my main recommendation would be to improve public transit.
All right. So another question from an audience member. Given the fact that most of the polling is falling short of a 2/3 majority, what strategies may we employ to address that concern?
All right. So two different thoughts about that. One is that voters' preferences do give us a pretty clear roadmap for things that we can do, including moving forward on the network management that is already in place, improving that coordination, growing that ridership, showing that to the public that does have the potential to get that support up in the coming years before a measure goes on the ballot. Another logical option is a citizens initiative, and the regional measure authorizing legislation is likely to have provisions that would enable the regional measure to be put on by a citizens initiative. And a citizens initiative can pass with 50% plus one of the vote. So that greatly reduces the threshold required to win. And the current responses are well over that lower threshold. And so the opportunity for strong accountability and ongoing improvement can help give confidence to the funders that would be needed to help bankroll a signature gathering effort. So we can both make progress on the things that voters want to see, and also have the potential to have a signature gathering effort that could be successful at a lower threshold.
All right. And Matt, are you going to jump in?
Yeah, I mean, I was just going to say that I think the polling is, pretty consistent, that highlighting how it's going to, improve public transit service by making public transit more convenient, reliable, and faster. And then also highlighting how it's going to ensure that, taxpayer dollars are going to be spent more effectively and focused on improving transit and roads specifically, with additional oversight and accountability measures and reduced bureaucracy, are really the key ways for us to boost what's already strong support, but boost it even higher.
Yeah, so probably a strategy question for Adina here. Given the fact that high net worth individuals and businesses often are the ones who would pay for a citizen initiative, and we're asking for an increase in taxes for those very same groups, what thoughts do you have in terms of messaging and strategy to deal with that issue?
So that is obviously something that will require some strategizing. There was a ballot measure that was on the ballot in recent years for a high income tax measure that was relating to electric vehicles. I apologize, I don't exactly remember the details of that. But what I do know is that it did get on the ballot, and it did have support in the signature gathering effort by some deep-pocketed entities. And so I think there needs to be quite a lot of uh, discussion and organizing amongst, whether it's through a signature gathering effort or whether it is just about creating a campaign to have consensus amongst the various different entities in order to pass a campaign. In general, a principle is that in order to get a measure passed, there needs to be very broad support and the lack of a funded opposition. So the work to build up that consensus and create a campaign needs to be done, whether it's at the 2/3 or at the 50%. And in our region that has many people that are progressive leaning, including people that are progressive leaning that do have quite a lot of money, there may well be people and entities that could contribute to a signature gathering effort.
All right, thank you. Next up, another question from the audience. Promising greater coordination between 27 agencies needs to be realized. How open are our 27 agencies to this closer collaboration?
All right. So this is something where we have seen quite a lot of progress in the last few years. There was during the pandemic, a task force convened that came up with a transformation action plan for those 27 agencies to be working together. And they have been making progress on those actions, ranging from getting to free and reduced price transfers this fall, that Bay Pass all agency transit pass, progress on the integrated signage. All of these things are moving forward. And so we are confident, not just confident by what we believe, but confident in what we see, that progress is being made. However, that collaboration is still technically optional. And that is why we want to see the law strengthened to make that collaboration be required, not optional. And we also see that the progress as it's being made is good, but it is too slow. And so therefore we want to see in the network management, the ability to make swifter decisions and make swifter progress. And having the experts as part of the decision-making process will also help with making firm and swifter decisions in order to bring about that change that voters want to see.
Where do you expect opposition to this proposed measure to come from, and what are some of the reasons for that potential opposition?
So there is always opposition by people in our community that don't believe in public infrastructure, don't believe in public schools, don't believe in many other sorts of public investments, and they usually oppose any sort of tax. In general, in the Bay Area, the people that support public infrastructure far outnumber the smaller minority of people that generally oppose taxes. And in addition, there are a lot of important issues in working out the details of the spending plan in the measure before it goes on the ballot, and in working out the type of tax, the revenue mechanism. And that consensus building process in order to have a strong coalition is essential. If that coalition process is not done well, then any entity that says, I generally like this, but here's this one little thing that I don't like and I'm going to fight it, that's something that can drag measures down. And so that puts a lot of responsibility on the coalition partners that are building a shared picture that will get enough support and not have funded and concerted opposition.
All right. How has work from home impacted travel patterns and the politics of transportation in the region?
Mm-hmm. So travel patterns with work from home following the pandemic crisis, those travel pattern changes are long lasting and have a long-term impact in terms of less white collar commuting. But also in the Bay Area, before the pandemic, we had overemphasized white collar commuting in planning our transportation system and running it. What we've learned from regions around North America and around the world is that regions that all along had supported more kinds of trips than that narrow focus on white collar commuting were more resilient, including places that have a high level of white collar work from home. It became clear to many more people during the pandemic that so-called essential workers, people with service jobs, medical workers continued to use transit. And we're also seeing that evening and weekend ridership has grown more quickly. So the conclusion to that is that by building up our transit system and evolving it so that it is supporting more kinds of riders, more kinds of trips, continuing to have white collar commuting as part of the mix, but a much greater diversity of trip types is something that can help have a strong high ridership public transportation system like we see elsewhere in the world that has, less of a focus on white collar commuting than we had before the pandemic.
Right. Several of the Bay Area's largest employers run their own employee buses. How you persuade them that they should support a higher payroll tax or income tax or on them for this measure when they're already paying to bus employees to and from work?
Yeah. What we have heard over time for years is that the employers that run private transit systems don't do that because they love being in the transportation business. They want to be in whatever primary business that they are in. And they run the private transportation because the public transportation has not served enough of the needs. And so historically, large employers have supported transportation. And so by providing a plan that not only maintains, but improves and does a better job of coordinating our public transportation system, that is a good likelihood of having that corporate support. They want to see better public transportation. They don't do private transportation because they love it.
All right. We have a question about regional funding and whether or not existing regional funding adequately funds BART. Could you talk a little bit about the funding mix that supports BART, for example?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So the way that I would take that looking at the question is the primary focus of this transportation funding measure needs to be on transit operations, on transit service, maintaining the service and improving the service. Historically, in the Bay Area, we have focused our funding very heavily on capital programs and expanding the system, and somewhat underemphasized actually running the service and making the service convenient for people. So especially with the financial challenges coming out of the pandemic, we absolutely need to make the primary focus on maintaining and improving and coordinating that service. And then with that, looking for what funding may be available beyond that to make some targeted improvements and expansions to the trains and buses. Bus rapid transit can be extremely cost-effective ways of moving people and improving our system as well. So we believe that we should, one, primary focus on transit operations and service, and two, have a very clear goal-oriented orientation towards the capital funding in a way that is building out a network delivering service to more people.
All right. So just to refocus on our kind of three main takeaways, transit is still popular. There's a lack of faith in government's ability to execute on what it promises. And our community supports progressive tax sources that do not put additional burden on the working class in the region. Clearly, our region still remains progressive, but is pragmatic and is looking for solutions to our transportation problems and to make democracy and governance more efficient and more effective. We can truly be a beacon for the rest of the country and how to do it right if we can pull it off. I want to thank all of you for attending. I want to thank our panelists for participating, and let's go forward and win. Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
And thanks to everyone who will all be needed to help bring this future about.